Thank you, Father. That's actually the first time I've encountered that pun of pro-life and prolific. That was very clever.
That'll be your next book.
Yeah. Well, my next book is called The Memoirs of St. Peter, and it's a commentary on the Gospel of Mark, new translation commentary. I've just signed a contract this week for it. That will be coming out later this year. Keep your eyes open for that. All right, so the title of my talk is called The Unbreakable Connection Between Abortion and Contraception, an Unpleasant Fact. I call this an unpleasant fact, not only because abortion and contraception are both unpleasant things, but also because in pro-life gatherings it is often regarded as unpleasant because it seems unfriendly to point out that contraception brings forth abortion. Our Protestant brethren in Christ do not share the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception, and people say that for political purposes it's better to focus on areas of agreement rather than risking fights over disputed matters. But let's put politics aside for the moment and ask what the truth is. Mother Teresa is often quoted as saying that the fruit of abortion is nuclear war. Actually, she didn't say that as far as anyone can tell, but she could easily have said that. I want to argue that abortion is the fruit of contraception. If so, it follows shockingly that the fruit of contraception is nuclear war. It seems an outrageous claim, but perhaps it's true for all that. There are various ways of establishing the point. First, the fruit of contraception is abortion as regards jurisprudence. Think that until the 1960s, there were still Comstock Act regulations on the books in many states, which made the sale of contraceptives illegal even to married couples. These laws were overturned by the Supreme Court's muddled Griswold decision in 1965. By 1973, in the merest twinkling of an eye, only 8 years later, the Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade had drawn an inference from a right to contraception to a right to abortion. Their reasoning was that a right to privacy protected decisions about contraception for married couples. It gave control to couples to procreate or not as they wished. But no right worthy of its name is held by other than individuals, or so the court said, plausibly in Eisenstadt versus Baird in 1971. Thus, it is individuals who most fundamentally have a right to privacy. And this means in practice that they have the right to control whether they procreate or not in their private couplings. But they cannot really control their couplings if the woman does not have control. Among individuals, it's really most important as a matter of control that the woman have control. But she cannot have this complete control except by aborting the results of intercourse before this comes to light. Indeed, the framework of rights would make little sense if a marvelous right to privacy gave us freedom to couple as we pleased, but then failed to shield us when only one such random coupling could imply that we had to care for a child for 20 years. Some of you may be thinking, well, I have used contraception, but I don't believe in the right to privacy of Griswold. But I would ask such a person to consider whether they really do grant that the state could, in principle, override your decision that you should use contraception. If not, you implicitly do accept that there is a right to contraception, and it seems that you have accepted the common reasoning which leads to abortion. Note as an aside that people say that the revolution in culture whereby sodomy went from being legal to being celebrated in same-sex marriage was the fastest social revolution in history. Not so. The transition from Griswold to Roe, from contraception to abortion, was even more radical and took an even shorter time. I would urge that if we step back and look at the dramatic suddenness of this transition, surely the burden of proof falls on someone who denies the necessary connection between contraception and abortion. Contraception is an illusory resting point between chastity and abortion. If couples have sexual relations as they wish, not from a rational decision to have relations only in the context of a marriage, then they will most often be having relations where the conception of a child is positively not wanted. Unless they admit that they are being mind-numbingly irrational, which few people will admit, there must be a solution. Unless you have some other idea, abortion is the sole solution when people have sex, a child is not wanted, and contraception failed. In graduate school, I had a conversation about abortion with one of the most intelligent students I had met. I explained the techniques of abortion, the fallacies in the usual arguments, the judicial history, and so on, and he was just about to be convinced. But then he said, "I can't become pro-life." "Why?" I asked. "Because if I do," he said, "I'll have to give up sex, and I don't think I can do that." As I said, he was very intelligent and honest, and he saw immediately, and in his honesty, expressed the connection I'm arguing for today. He saw that if you absolutely don't want to be tempted to take care of the problem, and you don't want to give the child up, and you're not prepared to raise it, that is, if you are not open to procreation, as I said, then you should not use contraception. The essence of contraception is the idea that man is autonomous and a law unto himself, and he can define the meaning of the Marriage Act as he wills. He does not need to subordinate his decisions to nature or to God. There is no objective meaning there already which he must try to construe and abide by. There cannot be a right or wrong in the technology of controlling births. Right because respecting nature, wrong because exploiting nature. It took the Supreme Court a mere 25 years to make this premise explicit in the famous mystery passage of the 1991 Casey decision. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of life. The same connection between contraception and abortion shows up in ostensibly compassionate social justice initiatives. If poor women or women in developing countries can get power over their lives and freedom from men only by having total control themselves of the time and possibility of conception, then they must equally have total control over whether conception leads to a child, which they must take care of. All of the NGOs which distribute contraception believe that abortion is a necessary backstop to contraception. They'll say this secretly, while publicly they wring their hands and lament abortion as a necessary evil. If pressed, they'll rationalize their support of abortion as an unintended side effect of their promotion of contraception, as if to say they can't be held responsible for something that nature has rigged in such a prejudicial manner. There's a necessary connection between contraception and abortion, they think, but they blame nature for it. They are so wedded to this connection that when President Trump reinstated the so-called Mexico City policy, which denies U.S. aid to any NGO which provides, counsels, or refers to abortion, or which promotes a change in a country's laws towards permitting access to abortion, not a single NGO agreed to sever its contraception work from its abortion advocacy. Are we witnesses for life the only foolish ones who continue to insist that in principle the two are separable? Likewise, every expert invited to the Pontifical Academy of Sciences to discuss population and contraception, including Paul Ehrlich of population bomb fame and John Bongartz of the Population Council, also advanced the opinion in that forum that abortion, although regrettable, they would say, is indispensable in their work. You may not be aware that since Humanae Vitae, the 50th anniversary of which we celebrate this year, there has been a constant stream of Jesuit moral theologians arguing in print that the encyclical was a mistake, that it is enough if the unitive and procreative dimensions of sex and marriage are linked in only a very general way, not in each marital act, and that the really deep meaning of Paul VI's teaching is the idea that couples should exercise responsible parenthood. People who think this way will naturally also regard contraception as a necessary means to put a brake on man's activity which damages the environment. Earlier this week, it was reported that the Vatican had scandalously awarded a medal, the distinction of Dame Commander in the Pontifical Equestrian Order of St. Gregory, to the most publicly notorious European activist in favor of abortion, the Dutch minister Liliane Ploumen. The Vatican, in a statement, later said the medal was conferred to Ploumen as a pro forma exchange of honors in the context of a state visit, and that no support for her views may be inferred. Of course, they could demonstrate very clearly that the medal is a meaningless matter of protocol, which implies no approval, by sending these medals belatedly to President Trump and to his entourage. But what the scandal illustrates so clearly is that it is not possible to embrace contraception without getting entangled with abortion. If there are actors in the Vatican who are sympathetic with what I have explained as a long-standing public attitude among prominent Jesuit moral theologians, they will find themselves inevitably getting entangled in abortion too. If they don't walk into it themselves, the Lillian Plumans of the world will draw them in. The fruit of contraception is abortion, undoubtedly. What does that imply for us gathered here? Should we, for instance, hold a march for NFP as well as a march for life? No, but it does imply that we should not pat ourselves on the back for addressing solely the consequences of the so-called sexual revolution. The causes need to be addressed as well, which we won't succeed in doing if we continue to insist on a falsehood that abortion and contraception are separable. For society in general, I do not speak to unusual particular cases. They are not separable in theory, in practice, or in fact. A good first step is the humble one of trying to live purity and chastity with greater refinement. But among you there must not be even hint of sexual immorality, St. Paul says. We can, and other Christians can, look to Mary just as her child Jesus did, and see in her own purity and chastity a verification of the ideals of the Jewish tradition of Tower of David, Tower of Ivory, House of Gold, Ark of the Covenant, Spes Nostra et Vita Nostra. Thank you.